Now, welcome to Let's Talk Some Andor, where we will be discussing some of the comments left on the review of Episode 8 over on the other channel. Narkina 5 is the name of the episode, which means if you have not seen it or you're not all caught up, you may want to skip this video until you are, because there will be some major spoilers. All right, and let us kick it off as usual with your brief review of this episode.
All right, the episode may have been named after the prison, but there was so much extra going on. It was great. We saw Mon talking with Tay again, and the daughter like, hey...
Yeah, what's up with the daughter? I mean, there's some comments on that one later. She's sketchy. Something's going to happen with her.
Maybe it's a trust thing. We'll
I mean,
see.
It's a normal teenage... I'm not saying she's like a spy for the Empire. It's a teenage daughter thing, but she's going to do something dumb.
Well, her dad might be asking her to watch, too.
Yeah, I mean,
there's something wrong, and we know it. But that's a whole nother can of worms. But we're seeing, here's Cyril trying to defend himself to Deidre, and here's Deidre trying to push her agenda because she knows she's right, and she is right. We don't want her to be right, but she's right. And they're tracking Luthen, for Pete's sake.
You mean Access?
Yes.
Yes. Access. The centralized figure she knows is out there.
I know they mean Access, A-X-I-S, like he is hinging everything.
Yes.
He's the access point, but I'm like, Access, he gets them stuff.
Which
is also true, because he seems to
is,
supply stuff to Saw. He is...
Actually, Access, either way, is a great name for him, yes.
But there's just so much extra going on, and then you can compare the prison that Cassian is in to the prison that Jyn was in that was described further in Rebel Rising, and it is so different to see this outdoor labor work versus he works in this very sterile industrial environment. It's so weird.
Yeah, that's the Empire. I mean, the Empire's got enough projects for its involuntary workforce to participate in. All right, so let's move on to the comments, and we will start it, as always, with the top-rated comment from the other video.
All right. The Untreated Spasm says, the writing has been great so far. Never thought I'd watch a Star Wars show in which I can derive so much enjoyment from just characters talking to one another.
It's like the Game of Thrones of Star Wars, right? Because Game of Thrones is like 95% people standing around talking and 5% pretty cool action. This is
the new season's a little different.
Yeah, but I'm talking classic Game of Thrones. There's a lot of talking, and it's cool to have lightsaber battles and ship battle. I mean, I love all that stuff. I think we all love that stuff, right? But it is so meaningless if the characters involved in it that you don't know them or don't care about them. Mm-hmm. And that's what's great about this is we get to know these characters before they put them into, terrible situations like Andor in this prison. You can feel yourself in his shoes, pun intended, because he's not wearing shoes. But you can, I know that's terrible. Sorry. But you can feel yourself in his shoes, right? In this prison. He, in theory, didn't do anything wrong in regards to what he's accused of. And yet here he is in this, horrible, horrible situation. And you root for him. You're like, how are you going to get out of this? And you see him noticing these little things. And I don't know. I just love everything about this show.
Next comment comes from Forest Films. One of the best things about Andor, besides the acting, writing, and cinematography, is that it shows how brutal the Empire really is. The prison seems like it would come straight out of a dystopian novel, and the aesthetic of it seems like it would belong to THX 1138. The workplace chatter of the Imperials in the mundanity of day-to-day life in this show shows the banality of evil perfectly, in a way no Star Wars yet has been able to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, blowing up Alderaan is one thing, but showing the prison, like Andor in this prison, somebody who has done, again, in the context of what he's accused of, he's done nothing wrong, and yet here he is, and we have so many others in this prison too that he at one point says, gets asked, "What are you in here for?" Nothing, literally nothing, and there's a lot of that going on. Is the response?
Well, even Deidre showing up now on Ferrix. First thing she does, she hauls that poor guy into questioning. They beat him up for answers. They haul her in, and she's like, no, we gotta let her see what I did first to scare her. I mean, it's all day-to-day work for Deidre, but my God.
What I love about that,
brutal.
It's so well done because she tells the others, keep him in here, I want her to see him. And then when Bix actually shows up, Dedra or Dedra blows up. Like, what are you doing? Why? And you could see the other officer like, what? Because they look confused too. They were just told they don't understand her plan. So it's just this little subtle thing where her reaction or the reaction she gets out of them is like genuine, which adds to the whole like, she didn't really want me to see what they had done to Pac here.
I mean, this is really showing. I mean, she has a background in enforcement. Let's not forget that.
That's right. Yes.
And it's shining through here. She's more than just, I'm going to analyze data and figure this out. She is willing to act.
Yeah.
Next comment from Tyler Prather. Andy Serkis being in Star Wars again was a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. This kind of goes along with Chase Hedges, 67. Gotta love how they give Andy Serkis more to work with as a minor character in the nail scenes than he could ever work with as Snoke.
Wait a minute, that's Snoke?
What? He looks so different.
No, I mean, I joked about that in the other video. Let's not start the, Snoke theories. But no, it is kind of sad, right? I feel more afraid of this guy.
But he's just another prisoner.
But he's also working for the guards. It's such a brilliant
funny, though,
setup.
He's not working for the guards. They just gave him a role that said...
he's working for the guards.
No,
I know what you're saying, but he's totally on the guard side.
All of them are working for the guards.
Well, not exactly.
In a way. Because think about it. If you mess up your own team, you can deliberately sabotage your own team to get your team zapped if you don't feel like they're, doing well. His job is literally to keep these men working as hard as possible, because what are his punishments? If the worst table in the room gets punished, what do you think happens to the worst pot on the floor?
Well, he's like 200 some days away from going home, he's probably one of the closest to going home. So of course he doesn't want more time added. They just had their sentences doubled.
I'm just curious what that means, though.
Well, sure.
What happens to the pod manager as if he's the worst pod on the floor? What does he get if he's the best? Does he get the same rewards? You get either the shocked or you get flavor food? What are his rewards for doing the best for his group on his level?
Extra flavor? Maybe he gets a day shaved off. I don't know.
But like I was saying, he has his own risk and reward system just like they all do.
Of course he does. But I think it's more reward. I think it's
probably, or else why would you want that role?
Well, yeah. Yeah, if you're just going to get punished.
It might be more risk then, too.
It's hard to say all we know is he will do whatever he has to get home. And he's, a couple hundred days away from going home. He's going to turn in any of these guys. He's keeping them all against each other. That's the brilliance of the prison itself is, yes, you have the teams, the individual teams, which are kind of working together. Though even that said, if someone on your team is, sucking and can't, do their part.
There's resentment then.
Yeah, there's resentment. You're going to be angry at them. So you might try to find a way to... get them to jump out of their cell at night.
Take a floor bath.
That's one way to put it. But no, it is kind of sad how great Andy Serkis. He's a talented guy, extremely talented guy, and he may have been wasted in one other previous Star Wars project and is being used very well on this one.
All right, let's move on then to the next comment from Area 1313, and Tony Gilroy saying there would be no fan service. Laughy emojis. He's dropping subtle and beautiful fan service every week. I love this show. I wish Obi-Wan was handled like this.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's fan service, yet it's not. It's supposed to be in there.
Fan service seems to have a negative connotation.
Yes.
Fan service is literally just putting things in there for the fans, little extra things for the fans to enjoy, little things like that. But we have this negative connotation that fan service means you went over the top, and it's too obvious, and it's done poorly. Whereas we say Easter eggs are good. Yeah.
But it's not just Easter eggs. Like, Easter eggs are little things in the background that you're only going to notice if if you're in the know, I guess you could say. And they're usually pretty...
Well, sometimes fan service, you have to be in the know as well.
Well, sure. But, usually fan service implies, like, even the more casual fan... Like, Luke showing up in The Mandalorian, like, it works. Yet you could also say it's fan service because, it's what everybody wants to see, right? Everybody wants to see Luke. I think it's a great moment. I'm not criticizing it. But my point is, I think... fan service generally gets thought of as something that most people are going to notice, and Easter eggs are things in the background that don't really matter that, a lot of people are going to miss.
So would you call putting Melchi in there a fan service or an Easter egg?
I think it's an Easter egg because, I don't think it's either one. I think it's just storytelling. I think because we know Melchi is going to show up later in Rogue One, it kind of, is it borderline fan servicey? Not really, because who's Melchi? And so I guess you could put, oh my goodness, I'm debating with myself here. So in a way you could kind of call it an Easter egg, yet we know he's going to show up later in the story. It's like I bring it up all the time, like Gold Leader and Red Leader in Rogue One showing up. Like, that makes sense. It could call it fan service, I guess, but it just makes sense. Like, Melchi being somebody in this prison that Andor helps escape and then devoting himself to stopping the Empire also makes sense.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Music here. I thought it was really interesting how closely Cassian observed his surroundings when he was brought to the prison and the working room. He was basically planning his escape already there. He knew that was likely his only chance to see all the possible escape routes and weaknesses of the prison. As Luthen said in Episode 3, rule number 2, build your exit on your way in.
Yeah, exactly. I love the little subtle callback type things, because there was a little hang up when he's being processed, and he kind of got to hear some terminology, some procedure. So you can see him kind of tucking that all away in the back of his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's...
Yeah, he got all that information. He made note of the boots. He's making notes of everything.
Yeah.
Just like he made a note, and we had to see as an audience how important it was. On the lift, the guard had to hold a taser. Because on the lift, there's no magic floor sensors.
Well, it's not magic, but yeah, I know.
There's no floor sensors to shock anybody.
Yes.
That is... I think that might come into play later. And
Certainly.
knowing that the guards, they do have a weapon. It's important. They might also be able to possibly find some way to insulate their feet without using those boots.
Yeah.
We'll just have to wait and see what the plan turns out to be.
Plus, there was him noticing the sign language, too.
Yeah. Not to mention, he still has to figure out how to get out past the whirlpools. Because I don't think they generally keep ships on the station.
I don't think they do either, because it seems like
they phone in for them.
They have the drop-off point. Well, I'm assuming the officers and stuff don't live on station, so there's probably another way off. But there's so few of them that you can't obviously take all the prisoners with you. You can only take a handful. Not that the ones getting away are probably going to be too concerned about that, but yeah, it's going to be very curious to see how they get out of this place. Because Andor is going to get out. There's going to be an escape.
Mm-hmm. Whether the help is going to come from without or within is what's going to be interesting.
It is going to be interesting.
Into the Void says, it's fantastic. As soon as it ends, I have a smile on my face and can't wait for the next one. For me personally, this is the best Star Wars show to date. It was clearly made by people great at their craft and with so much care for detail and storytelling. Not all Star Wars needs to be like this, but all Star Wars should be handled with this much care and respect for its audience.
Yeah, I could give this comment a round of applause, because it's not that all Star Wars has to be suddenly gritty and grounded like Cassian or Andor is. No, but all Star Wars needs to be handled with care. I'll never understand. I mean, we don't all have to like the same things. Like, I get the people who don't like Andor because it's boring or slow, and we'll talk more about that later, I think, probably. But it should still be whatever the intended audience is, let's say. It should still be handled with care. Like,
details need to be paid attention to. Dialogue needs to be meaningful and interesting.
Yeah, I don't understand why people
action for action's sake.
Like, you can enjoy something that's mediocre, right? I don't really care, but the level of defense I see sometimes out of people defending something that we all know is kind of bad or poorly written. Like, no, you should expect good things. You're paying for this content. Like, you're paying for Disney Plus, assuming you're not pirating it, of course. But we're paying for this. So it always kind of surprises me when I see people, well, I'm just happy to get Star Wars. Well, okay, I'm happy that's your approach and that works for you, but when people criticize, it's not because they want to be mean or nitpick or, ruin your enjoyment. They expect quality. They're paying for this. Star Wars is the premier franchise, and the people making it should treat it that way.
Right. I mean, think of the Kenobi prison break scene from Fortress Inquisitor.
Yes, Inquisitorious, yes.
Because they're Inquisitorious people. Yeah.
No, they're not.
But if they would have given that more thought, it could have been much better.
Of course, and it should have been. No, instead of the good guys doing something intelligent, the bad guys were incompetent, and that is all too often the case in bad writing. It's not that you can have an intelligent, enemy. It's that you bring your enemy down below your heroes, and at that point, what's the point of your story?
Next up, we have Captain Lore. I liked the symbolism they used with breathing. It's small, but in regards to the Empire, the man in the prison tells Cassian, "You're just taking a breather? Get back to work." That one was paraphrased. And Cinta says, "So you think the Empire stops to catch its breath?" This contrasts the scene we see about Marva in the Rebellion, where Bix says, "Your breathing is weak." This shows how the Empire is strong and unwavering, while the Rebellion is still weak and trying to get a foothold. Normally, I would think it was a coincidence, but with this show, I am much more confident that it wasn't. loving the attention to detail in the show.
Yeah, there are so many little intricate threads, and that's brilliant to point that out. I didn't notice that myself, but that just shows the level of writing here.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that everything is considered.
The
yes,
detail.
Talent, detail, everything is considered. Everything makes sense. Everything flows. It is, again, I am in awe of the. Well, I'm not in awe of the level of writing. It's not that we've never seen a show well written before, right? But in Star Wars, not that it hasn't been well written before, but it has taken it to another level. It's nice to see Star Wars treated this way. Treated, seriously isn't the right word for it, but trying to look at everything in a logical way, which I know there are a lot of illogical things in Star Wars, which is fine. The Force is not meant to be quantified or rocket science. It's, I get that. But sometimes you do want to see the universe treated like it is a real functioning place and how it functions and why the people work the way they do.
All right, Just Wasted 3 Hours here says, it's a shame that some people have equated slow pace with boring. Slow? At times, yes. Boring? Absolutely not. There are so many levels of nuance going on here, and always something interesting to look at, listen to, or think about. As you say, the writing, acting, and directing, and cinematography effects, etc., are all top-notch. For anyone sitting on the fence about whether they should invest their time in this show, I'd say watch the first 3 or 4 episodes and see how it grabs you.
Yeah, I recommend it to everybody. And like I said, if it's not your thing, that's fine. For me, when I hear it's boring, I don't personally understand that. I find when I have to pay attention, like this level of attention, because, we're just discussing the nuance before, how things can, call back to each other and relate to each other. I find myself more on the edge of my seat when I'm hearing two people, having an interesting discussion than I am when, lightsabers are swinging. Again, not that I don't love lightsabers. I do. All Star Wars fans, I think, do. But it surprises me when I hear people say how boring it is or there's nothing to talk about. And I know there's been other YouTubers out there that have not enjoyed this show at all, other Star Wars YouTubers, and they say there's nothing to talk about with it. And that, I'm like, how come I sit here and my reviews of it have all been 25, 30 minutes, and I feel like I'm scratching the surface. I feel like I'm doing a bare bones review. I'm like editing out parts because I feel like I'm talking continuously because there's so much to discuss with the show.
I agree with that. We've had conversations about just tiny 2-minute scenes. We could have a conversation for an hour about it. There are so many small facets to take into account. We're seeing the story with Mon Mothma, we're seeing a story with Luthen, and then there's an interaction between the two where you're wondering, we know for sure what happens eventually-ish, but I'm wondering if Mon's going to lose her nerve. The banker guy seems to have disappeared on her. Luthen seems to her like a loose cannon. He's doing stuff that she is like, this is too much, it's too far. I don't want the Empire hurting people. He's like, well, they have to hurt people for us to succeed. And
yeah, every single character has something going on, and there are dozens of characters at this point. And even the small characters have, even Mon's daughter, for example.
Yeah, Lita.
Even her, we're like, well, what's the deal with her? What is she going to do? What's her story? To me, it's fascinating. To me, this is what an interesting story is. It's interconnected. It's character-driven. It's not just explosions. And again, I say it for the 5th time or something like that. I love all of that about Star Wars. I do. I love a good action-adventure story where, doesn't have to be intricate and deep. But the fact that we can have it in Star Wars, to me, is just, it's a treat.
Marvelous Mike says, I love the series. The writing is amazing. Recently, I am reading the book Thrawn by Timothy Zahn. I wish these writers could pitch a Thrawn live-action series in the same tone. I really think more Star Wars fans should give Andor a chance. I wish there was more alien presence, but I do like how the series expands the Star Wars universe, making it more inclusive, with still focusing on a major theme of rebellion against Empire. I honestly believe, though, that the series has some flaws. It should be in consideration for an Emmy Award because of the writing. It is the best Disney Plus series to date.
It should be. This is extremely well written.
I'm sure it will be.
I know I keep saying the same things, but it
will be.
It should be, and if it isn't, it'll be a crime. But Thrawn, he is the perfect fit for this. Tony Gilroy and Timothy Zahn should be locked in a room together and write a Thrawn trilogy, a Thrawn series on Disney Plus. Please get these two together and do something. I know, I think Gilroy has said he's not interested in just making Star Wars his thing henceforth, but if I had one wish in this life, it would be to get those two together and to create, a Thrawn story in this motif, if you will.
Next comment is from Vestra Kai. It is decently well written, but I fear they are falling into tropes already.
I think everything is going to fall into a trope. It's almost impossible. And I was actually trying to find some negative. Somebody joked, and I think it was me Monday. I was just gushing over Andor, not finding negative things. There isn't a lot of negative things, at least on my personal reviews of it. So I am trying to find something that was a little more to the negative side. And not that I just want to defend it for the sake of defending it. Certainly, this commenter can think what they want, but all stories fall into tropes of some kind. It's almost impossible not to
write something 100% non-trope.
The only way to kind of do that is to make something, I don't want to say nonsensical, but something that is so realistic that it doesn't, it's not so much even a story anymore. I mean, Game of Thrones kind of does this extremely well. It's borderline so realistic at times that it's depressing. That it's like, yeah, that's probably how it actually would go. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to have any kind of uplifting story at all, you're going to sometimes fall into tropes. There's going to sometimes be story contrivances and conveniences, but it's all about how well you mask them. It's all about how well you create tension. Even though we know Andor is going to live, right? We know that's going to happen. So,
well, with all of the books, TV shows, movies that exist today, it's hard to not fall into tropes.
Exactly.
Once a good trope is made, yeah, people will use it. That's just how it is.
Yeah, things become a trope for a reason.
But it's how well they handle being within their trope.
Yeah.
And Andor is handling it very well. All right, we'll move on to CyberDan42. I'm very much noticing a different attitude in Mon Mothma's daughter. In the early episodes, she appeared as a sullen daughter, but in this episode, she seemed more tense and nervous. And I feel something is happening. Also, I did love the apathy on display in the party, entitled wealthy elite with no connection to the people they're supposed to represent.
Yeah, I mean, we could make some comparisons there, right? It's kind of eerie to watch them like casually discussing, because we are literally seeing Cassian in prison experiencing the repercussions of the Empire's overreach, and here we have the rich sipping their their fancy Chandra worm drink. I forget the name of it already.
Squig.
The squig, yes. They're drinking their fancy drinks, just kind of casually. Oh, that's, if they don't want to go to prison, then don't do anything wrong. And, it's Mon who accurately points out, well, what I fear is your definition of wrong, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy for us to sit here, making the laws, but it's, who's actually enacting them and who actually gets to determine what is right and wrong. And these people are, suffering because, well, there isn't really a clear line, right? That shore trooper just got to decide, well, I feel like you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, Cassian, so you're going to spend 6 years in prison.
Well, it's interesting coming off of watching Tales of the Jedi, where you got hints of seeing some corruption within the Republic, and now you're seeing within the Empire the senators are just run wild. Some of them just the corruption has gotten even worse. The disconnect has seemed to have gotten even worse. Maybe because the Palpatine Emperor does not want them to see.
No,
he doesn't want them to see the suffering of people. Because he doesn't want them to interfere.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he gives them power. He lets the power corrupt some of them, and this is the result.
Well, yeah, I'm sure some of them have been, handed things under. Not that doesn't happen in the real world, but, you get a little something under the table. Your life is better. So what if some other people suffer because of your decisions or your apathy or your lack of wanting to notice certain problems?
Yeah, I do really want to know where they're going with Lita's character. She's become very noticeable. Originally kind of a background character, now she's become much more noticeable because either she's getting a whiff that her mom is doing something wrong, or maybe she thinks her mom is cheating on her dad. We don't exactly know where these thoughts of hers are right now, or how much she may or may not know what her mom's doing.
I think she likes her father more because her father's probably the fun parent. Yeah, and so if she sees mom with this other man and probably thinks that's hurting her father, and so she's going to react at some point.
Right. So she may have her own idea of what is going on.
It's probably wrong. I don't think she's like, oh, my mom's probably, working for the rebel. But who knows? Maybe she'll overhear something. We have no idea.
All right, and on to the last comment from Benjamin Rowe. This show is a masterpiece so far. The writing and the character and the world development is so realistic. I have rarely felt like this world was so real as I do now. Before Star Wars inspired me, amazed me. This show is making me feel real things. It's quite amazing. Example, the realistic nature of the procedures in the prison. Crazy how it gives the vibes of actual prisons and tactics from Earth. Feels like it really could have happened.
Yeah, that's what I love. It feels like they actually put thought into how that prison would work. Every little aspect of it is kind of thought out. Like, okay, we have a limited amount of prison guards, So how do we function this prison when we want to get these parts cranked out as fast as possible?
Right. It was a very interesting setup, and just the fact that there's so much detail in it. It's not just, look, here's a generic prison, we lock you in a cell, and this is how this goes. No, they gave you so much detail as to how this prison functions and works.
Down to what they
really
eat.
Thought about.
Yeah, just using the food as flavor, or flavor in the food as motivation. They show, this is how your cell is. Yeah. This is the procedure, how we go to and from. And again, we know that's going to be used later for the escape.
Prison slang, we call it a toilet, not a refresher.
Yeah, that Earth terminology, I deal with it.
Sneaks in.
Every now and then I hear it, and I'm like, ooh, I don't like that. But
it's prison
I'm fine
slang
with
now.
it.
That's a toilet. We don't call it a refresher. You don't need a refresh in the prison. That's a toilet.
We just call it a toilet here because we do. But, that's my one of my minor gripes. Some of the Earth terminology just momentarily rips me out of it, but that's fine. But no, I agree. But I love taking the galaxy. Again, seriously is not exactly the right word, but looking at how the galaxy functions, the nuts and bolts of everything in the galaxy, makes the galaxy feel more real than anything else I have seen out of Star Wars. Now, some of the books, novels, which is why I love to read them, they do similar things. They kind of go into the explanation, why things work the way they do. And again, this feels like taking those novels, putting them on screen, and doing it extremely well. All right, well, that is all we got for you this time. So take to the comments below. Tell us what you thought of this episode of Andor. Tell us what you think of the series so far. And do you want to see more like this in the future? Do you hope this is just the start of more like this? And again, not saying we can't get other types of Star Wars. Tales of the Jedi came out on the same day as this episode and was great. Whatever the case may be, leave your comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.